I think it would be important to realize the context in which this feast and solemnity was established. What year roughly was the Feast of Christ the King established? Excellent. Who said that? Kevin, was that you? Oh, impressive. 1925. Now, most of us would probably be thinking like, oh. Were all of you on the same page, 1925? No, yeah, no, yeah, maybe. You would kind of think like this is an important solemnity, right? Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception, solemnity of St. Joseph, solemnity of John the Baptist. You know, these solemnities go back quite a way. Even yesterday, what did we celebrate yesterday in the Catholic calendar? The presentation of Mary. Very good. I don't even need to preach. Why do I even take my time up here? I mean, the presentation of Mary. Even the presentation of Mary goes back, goes far back, right? To around the 6th century, maybe. And even the devotional house of Anna and Joachim, the parents of Mary, is in Jerusalem, a very powerful place of prayer. But the Feast of Christ the King, the solemnity of Christ the King, was established by Pius XI in 1925. Why? Why would he establish such a solemnity in the world at that moment? Well, remember what happened in the late 19th century with atheistic communism, Marxism, being established in the world and being pushed to become a way to govern all humanity, to bring all nations into communion. This is a concern of Pius XI. Should still be a concern of ours because these philosophical trends are still in the world. That does not free mankind, but enslaves mankind. But my brothers and sisters, we celebrate the authority of Jesus Christ today, subjecting all nations, all powers under his feet. He will subject all enemies until that point in the second reading that we heard, under his feet. And who is this Jesus? The King of glory, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, the King of all nations. But a naked and shamed, hungry and sick person dying on the cross. Even less than a person. Do you know what he was visibly seen as by the Romans? A slave. Roman citizens were beheaded as a more noble way of execution. Yet even further, in Jesus' own time, Jesus mounted the wood of the cross as his throne, and he dies on the cross as a slave, showing that even in political, governmental powers, where those governments or kingdoms or political philosophies enslave the people, even in those moments, those people, those slaves, would not be alone in their suffering. Even if they were naked, even if they were shamed, hungry, and left alone, even those slaves would find a home in the heart of Christ, the King, opened for all nations by the lance of a spear that pierced his heart for our salvation. My brothers and sisters, it is a quite powerful thing to reflect on. That Jesus establishes his kingdom through the instrument of the cross, through the instrument of suffering for something more than himself. What is truly transcendent about our humanity is that we can place our suffering aside and choose to love someone else despite the suffering of what we may be facing. My friends, as we shared just a moment ago, this is the definitive end of a liturgical season. This is the definitive end of a liturgical year. As Catholics, we begin a new year with the season of what? Advent. Christ the King is at the very end. Exclamation point. Again, reorienting our thoughts to the authority of Jesus Christ above all nations. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful that it would happen in the month of November? So let's recap. How was your year? Wonderful. Wonderful. Perhaps it was filled with suffering. Perhaps it was filled with fear. I look at this year and I will never forget it. You know why? Why do you think? I became a pastor. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. It works for me too. Why else do you think? It's a brand new day. Wonderful opportunities before us. When did the suffering start? March? Oh no. It started much earlier than that. It started in Advent. It started preparing for Christmas. When we were growing so much, we had growing pains. And we had to establish a tent outside for Christmas. And then the rains came and flooded us out. And we scrambled around pumping water and spreading mulch. And our finance manager, Michael Nolan, was counting every penny and saying, "Do we have to spend that penny?" A moment of suffering, but became a moment of great intimacy, where many people said it was the greatest Christmas they ever had. Certainly mine. Then March came around and interrupted our fish fries. We had the best fish fry that I've ever been a part of in any Catholic church. People were talking, hanging out, getting to know each other. I saw God's hand pulling in people that were not Catholic into our community because they smelled the fish. And they were sitting down with their brothers and sisters and they were having a communal experience. And I'm like, finally, yes, we've got it. This is going to be great. And then Easter. My first Easter. And nobody was in here. How do you think I felt about that? I'll never forget it. It'll be one of the most beautiful Easters of my life. When we lit a candle in this church for every single family and spent countless hours and days, just a small group of us, because as you remember, we were only allowed to gather in people 10. And we gathered and worked and worked and worked and lit candle after candle after candle. We had to go through a trial. You got to prepare for that, so we did it the day before and then we did it the day of too. And we suffered through that. We suffered through the unknowing of what will come. but then yet becomes such a beautiful memory and possibly one of the most impressive Easters that I will never forget. How was your year? The opportunity before us, my brothers and sisters, is to recognize that Jesus Christ is the highest authority in heaven, on earth, under the earth, until the end of time. Jesus Christ is that authority, and his prosperity that comes from the cross emanates upon his church. And though we may suffer, we do not suffer alone. They become occasions of intimacy, occasions of transformation, so that in the presence of suffering, something beautiful can be born. This is our faith. This is what we believe in, and this is what we are subject to. So my brothers and sisters, don't allow any type of government or any type of political philosophy to tell you how to look, how to think, how to feel. You are governed by a much higher authority. And Pius XI and his words and his establishment of this solemnity is still with us today. And he cautions the world. Do not give your minds and your souls to these powers, these secular institutions that don't want to unite you. They want to divide you. Give yourself to the one who would love you. He's already proven that. Be governed by him who cares for you, who feeds you, who clothes you, who is with you in your darkest days in prison when he visits you. He who reveals to us this weekend in his authority and solemn power that he cares for us like a shepherd, tenderly caring for each of his chosen ones. My brothers and sisters, we belong to the flock of the ones that have been chosen. So when we recap and look back at this year, what will you say about it? Will your commentary be governed by some politician? Will your commentary be governed by some type of journalist? Will your commentary be something that would fit into the agendas of Fox News or CNN or CNBC or all the other? They're all in the same. It's two. Or will your commentary reflect a different narrative? My narrative will be from the cross. And I pray that he keeps me there. Because it is that narrative that has given birth to eternal life and the salvation we receive from our King.